They say money isn't the root of all evil, it's just the fuel that keeps long-buried secrets alive. My name is Olivia Park, and up until last month, I was the dutiful daughter who sent half her paycheck home every month, convinced I was doing the right thing. Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs earlier, but love, especially family love, has a way of making you blind to the obvious. I was always the responsible one. Through college, I juggled part-time jobs and took out student loans so my younger brother, Ryan, could attend a top-tier private university without any debt. Your brother needs the best education, my mother would remind me. He's going to be a doctor. The fact that I was studying engineering never seemed to warrant the same level of urgency. The money transfers started 5 years ago, right after I landed what I thought was my dream job at a San Francisco tech startup. The company went public, my salary increased overnight, and before I could even celebrate, my mother was on the phone. "Olivia, sweetheart," she began, her voice slipping into that familiar tone I'd dreaded since childhood. "Your father and I are struggling with the mortgage. It started small, $2,000 a month to help with house payments. Then came the car repairs. Then Dad's insurance didn't cover a new prescription. The art gallery Mom ran was struggling due to the economy. Every month, a new crisis, a new reason why they needed me. Meanwhile, Ryan finished medical school and secured a residency at a prestigious Boston hospital. Isn't it wonderful?" Mom gushed during our weekly video calls. "And he's dating the chief of surgery's daughter. Such a perfect match. No one ever asked about me. No one wondered if I was okay. My dreams, my goals, my future, it all took a back seat. The down payment I had been saving for a home? Gone. The additional certifications I needed for a promotion? Unaffordable. Dating? That was a joke. How could I even think about starting a life of my own when my financial future was already spoken for? Then I met Mark. We connected at a tech conference, and he was everything I hadn't realized I needed: brilliant, kind, and, most surprising of all, understanding about my financial situation. On our third date, he said something that stuck with me. "Your dedication to your family is admirable, but don't you think it's time they learned to stand on their own?" I brushed it off. They were my parents. They had sacrificed so much for us. I owed them. But his words took root in my mind, and with every missed opportunity, every dream I pushed aside for the sake of another bank transfer, that doubt grew stronger. Then last week, the breaking point arrived. For the first time in years, I had managed to save enough for a certification program, the key to a head engineering position I had been working toward. I was on the verge of submitting my application when my phone rang. Mom, crying. "The gallery's in trouble," she sobbed. "We need $50,000 by the end of the month or we'll lose everything. Olivia, you're our only hope. Your brother is still paying off his loans, and you know how much this gallery means to me." I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at my laptop screen, where my future waited in the form of an application. 5 years, over $150,000 sent, and now, the entirety of my savings, $50,000, was supposed to vanish, too. I took a breath. "I can't, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but firm. The silence on the other end of the line was immediate, heavy. "Can't?" When she finally spoke, her voice had changed, cold, sharp. "Or is it that you just won't?" My mother's voice was sharp, edged with disbelief. "After everything we've done for you? We gave up so much to give you and your brother a good life, and this is how you repay us?" I swallowed hard. "Mom, I've been sending money home for 5 years. I need to start thinking about my own future, too." "Your future?" She let out a bitter laugh. "And what about mine? My gallery? Do you have any idea what people will say if we have to close? What that will do to our reputation in the community? How can you be so selfish?" That word, selfish, hit me like a slap. I'd heard it too many times before. Selfish for wanting new school supplies when Ryan needed money for sports equipment. Selfish for applying to out-of-state colleges when they wanted me close to home. Selfish for choosing engineering instead of something more fitting for a girl. I gripped the phone tighter. "I'm not being selfish," I said, steadier this time. "I'm being practical. I need to understand where all this money is actually going. You and Dad should be able to manage on your pensions and Social Security. The house is almost paid off. What's really happening here? How dare you question us?" Her voice shot up in volume. "After everything we've sacrificed for you? Well, if this is how you're going to be, don't bother calling until you've come to your senses." And don't expect us to support your choices anymore. The call ended before I could respond, before I could point out the absurd irony in that last statement. That night, I barely slept. Numbers, financial statements, and old conversations swirled in my mind, colliding with Mark's words about enabling dependency. Something didn't add up, but I couldn't see the whole picture. The next morning, I called in sick and started digging. I still had access to my parents' mortgage records. I had been making the payments directly for years. A quick call to the bank revealed something I hadn't expected. The loan? The representative's voice was polite, almost casual. Ms. Park, that mortgage was paid off 2 years ago. My breath caught. Then, where have the payments I've been sending been going? The line went quiet as she checked. It looks like they've been redirected to a different account. My hands trembled as I requested more details. Using the power of attorney I'd been granted for emergencies, I pulled up my parents' bank statements. What I found made my stomach turn. Large, recurring transfers to an unfamiliar account. Withdrawals that lined up perfectly with Ryan's supposed emergency requests for help with student loans, loans that, according to his residency contract, should have been covered by his hospital's repayment program. Charges from luxury retailers, high-end restaurants, first-class flights to Boston. Then came the credit card statements, and suddenly, everything was clear. My parents, it seemed, had been living quite comfortably on my so-called support payments. Designer clothes, art-buying trips, country club memberships, and most shocking of all, regular deposits into an investment account in Ryan's name. But the final, undeniable truth was in my mother's own books. Her struggling gallery, the one she had cried about on the phone just last night, hadn't been struggling at all. The business had been turning a healthy profit for the past 3 years. The sales numbers, the income statements, everything pointed to success. A success that had been carefully hidden, with earnings funneled elsewhere. I was still staring at the screen, feeling the full weight of betrayal settle in my chest, when my phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. How could you do this to Mom and Dad? They gave you everything, and now you're just abandoning them. You've always been jealous of my success. You're ruining everything. Jealous of his success. The success that had been built on my sacrifices, on the dreams I had given up. I took a slow, deep breath and typed back a single reply. Check your trust fund statement lately, little brother? Then, without hesitation, I called Mark. Remember when you told me it was time they learned to stand on their own? I said as soon as Mark picked up. I think we're past that now. It's time for something else, time for the truth to come out. The rest of the day was a blur of printing, scanning, and organizing. I made copies of everything, bank statements, credit card transactions, gallery financials, investment records. The deeper I dug, the more astonishing the deception became. Layer upon layer of financial manipulation, carefully woven together not just to drain me dry, but to hide what they were really doing with the money. Then, another message from my mother popped up on my phone. Your father and I are very disappointed in you. We raised you better than this. If you want to be part of this family, you'll send the money by Friday. I stared at the words, then at the certification program application still open on my laptop. My future on one side of the screen. Years of deception stacked neatly beside it. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt something else. A clean, sharpened anger. You're right, Mom, I murmured, my voice low but steady. You did raise me better than this. Better than lies. Better than manipulation. Better than theft masquerading as love. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd need. When the receptionist answered, I took a breath and said the words that would change everything. I need to speak to someone about reporting financial fraud. The forensic accountant's office was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me, cool, clinical, with nothing but the quiet hum of a computer filling the space. Across the desk, Julia Reyes scrolled through the documents I had provided, her expression giving nothing away. Your parents have been running a fairly sophisticated operation, she finally said, her tone almost admiring in its objectivity. From what I see here, the gallery wasn't just struggling, it was a front for laundering money. The funds you sent home each month were being cycled through the business to create the appearance of legitimate income while the actual profits were being redirected. Redirected where? I asked, gripping the armrests of my chair. Julia pulled up another set of numbers. For one, the investment account under your brother's name. Built primarily from your deposits and hidden gallery profits. Current balance. She turned the screen toward me. $812,476. The room tilted. Nearly $1 million. While I lived in a tiny apartment. While I skipped vacations. While I put my dreams on hold. I forced myself to take a breath. What are my options? My voice was steady, but my nails dug into the fabric of the chair. Julia leaned back, fingers steepled. With this level of evidence, you have several. The most obvious? Report it to the IRS and the FBI. This level of tax evasion and financial fraud would certainly interest them. I swallowed hard. Other options? You could file a civil lawsuit to recover your money. Given the paper trail, you'd have a strong case. She hesitated, then added, or you could take this to your family directly, present the evidence, and see if they're willing to settle it privately. But given the systematic nature of their deception, I wouldn't recommend that route. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. The bank called about you accessing our accounts. I exhaled slowly. They knew. How dare you invade our privacy? Your father is having chest pains because of the stress you're causing. I hope you're happy. The guilt flared up automatically, familiar, well-trained. But this time, I saw it for what it was. Another weapon. Another manipulation. I want everything, I said to Maria, my voice unwavering. Civil and criminal. They don't get to walk away from this. The following week passed in a blur of legal meetings, filings, and endless paperwork. I reported them to every agency that could take action, ensuring every fraudulent transaction, every financial lie, every calculated betrayal was documented. Through it all, Mark was by my side, offering unwavering support, reminding me why I was doing this when exhaustion and doubt threatened to creep in. His righteous anger fueled mine, keeping me steady. Then the letter arrived. A legal threat from my parents' lawyer, warning that if I continued, they would sue me for defamation. I scanned the letter and let out a humorless laugh. I recognized the law firm immediately. It was the same one that had handled Ryan's trust fund. They're bluffing, my lawyer assured me. They know we have hard evidence. This is just an intimidation tactic. They expected me to back down. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. The confrontation happened at the gallery, right in the middle of one of my mother's carefully curated, high society artist receptions. Portland's elite milled about, sipping expensive wine, nodding along as she delivered her speech, one I had heard variations of my entire life. Now, more than ever, we must support struggling local artists in these uncertain economic times. I stepped forward, my voice cutting cleanly through the elegant murmur of the crowd. Speaking of support, let's talk about how you've been funding Ryan's secret trust fund with my money. The room stilled. Every head turned. My mother froze mid-gesture, her polished smile flickering. Olivia, this isn't the time or place. Actually, I said, pulling out the copies of my financial records, it's the perfect time and place. I held up the documents for everyone to see. This gallery wasn't struggling. It was a front. My support payments were being laundered through your books to fabricate income while you hid the real profits. Shall we discuss the tax implications of that? Security. Mom called out, her voice sharp with panic. Nothing happened. None of the staff moved. They've all been served with subpoenas, I informed her, scanning the room. They'll be testifying. Just like the bank records will show exactly where my money really went, not to a mortgage that was paid off years ago, but to Ryan's trust fund and your personal luxuries. Her expression twisted, anger and desperation warring on her face. You ungrateful little. Dad's hand clamped down on her arm, silencing her. When he spoke, his voice carried that same authoritative weight that used to make me flinch. Olivia, these are serious accusations. Think very carefully about what you're doing to this family. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Family? I repeated, shaking my head. A real family doesn't steal from their daughter while elevating their son. A real family doesn't manipulate, lie, and commit fraud. A real family doesn't what? Ryan's voice cut through the tension as he stepped forward from the crowd, his jaw tight with barely restrained fury. Doesn't take care of their own? He scoffed. Mom and Dad knew I'd need capital to start my own practice. They were looking out for my future, planning ahead. What's so wrong with that? I turned, scanning the faces in the room, making sure they were hearing every word. Let me tell you all a story, I announced, my voice carrying through the hushed gallery. A story about parents who drained their daughter's income for years while living in secret luxury. About a brother who knew exactly where his trust fund money was coming from. About a gallery that claimed to be struggling when, in reality, its profits were being carefully hidden to avoid taxes. A ripple of uneasy murmurs swept through the crowd. I noticed some of the more prominent collectors edging toward the door, not wanting to be associated with the disaster unfolding before them. I took a step closer to my parents. The IRS and FBI have been notified, I continued, my voice even. They're very interested in your creative bookkeeping. And I've filed civil suits to recover every penny you stole from me. Mom's face crumpled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She took a step toward me, voice barely a whisper. You'll destroy us. I met her gaze, steady and unshaken. No, I corrected. You destroyed yourselves. I'm not destroying anything, I said, my voice steady. I'm just revealing the truth. The fallout was both more devastating and more liberating than I had anticipated. The gallery was seized as evidence. My parents were charged with multiple counts of tax fraud and financial crimes. Ryan's trust fund? Frozen, pending investigation. The carefully curated image of our family, the one I had clung to for so long, crumbled under the weight of reality. Mom swung between teary pleas for forgiveness and venomous accusations of betrayal. Dad retreated into an impenetrable silence. Ryan, ever the golden child, fumed over his ruined future, as if the future he had planned had been rightfully his, instead of something built on my stolen sacrifices. But then, something unexpected happened. Other voices emerged, cousins who had long suspected my parents' deceit but hadn't known how to warn me. Former gallery employees who shared their own stories of being coerced into covering for financial discrepancies. Even some of Mom's high society friends admitted they'd sensed something was off but had chosen to remain silent for the sake of social harmony. 6 months later, I sat in my new office, sunlight glinting off the framed professional engineering certification on the wall. The promotion had come through, along with a pay raise that finally reflected my worth. Mark and I had just put down a deposit on a condo, my first real investment in my own future. As for my parents, they took a plea deal to avoid longer sentences. They'll serve time, though not nearly as much as they probably deserve. The court-ordered restitution payments will take years, but I've realized I care less about recovering the money and more about maintaining the boundaries I fought so hard to set. Ryan wasn't as lucky. When word of the scandal broke, the prestigious hospital he worked for cut ties immediately. Last I heard, he had taken a job at a small practice in rural Maine, finally learning, perhaps for the first time, what it means to build a life on his own merits. Then, yesterday, a letter arrived. From my mother. I know we hurt you, but we're still family. Someday, when you have children of your own, you'll understand that parents only want what's best for their children. I stared at the words for a long moment before picking up my pen. My response was a single sentence. That's exactly why I'll never treat my children the way you treated me. The gallery building is for sale now. Sometimes I drive past it, remembering all the falsehoods that were sold there alongside the art. The for sale sign feels like more than just a real estate listing. It's a symbol, a reminder that everything has a price, but the true cost isn't always measured in dollars. Mark thinks we should buy it. Turn it into something good, he said with a grin. Maybe a community art space, an education center. Transform the scene of the crime into something better. I'm considering it. There's something poetic about repurposing a place built on deception into a space dedicated to truth. But for now, my focus is on a different transformation, one far more important. I'm no longer the dutiful daughter who poured her life savings into a bottomless well of obligation. I'm no longer the woman who measured her worth by how much she could sacrifice for others. The forensic accountant's final report sits in my desk drawer. Sometimes I take it out, not to relive the betrayal, but to remind myself that clarity always comes at a cost. And some prices? They're worth paying. They say money is the root of all evil, but I've learned something different. Money is just a mirror, reflecting who we truly are. For my parents, it was a tool for control. For my brother, it was an entitlement. For me, I've finally learned to see it for what it is, just a resource. Neither good nor evil. Useful only in the service of what truly matters. Last week, I started a support group for adult children of financially abusive parents. The stories I hear sound painfully familiar, the guilt, the manipulation, the slow erosion of self-worth. But in sharing them, we're reclaiming something powerful. We're learning to set boundaries. To say no. To recognize that love should never come with a price tag. My mother used to say that art is truth seen through a lie. How fitting, then, that the biggest lie of all, the illusion of parental sacrifice and unconditional love, ended up revealing the hardest truth I've ever had to face. Sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the family you need to become the person you're meant to be. I'm building a new family now. One founded on honesty, on mutual respect, on love that doesn't demand surrender. Mark and I are talking about marriage, about children, about creating the kind of home where support is given freely, not extorted. The money they stole can be replaced, the dreams they delayed can be pursued. But the truth they tried to bury? That's mine to keep. And it's priceless.